Thank you, Bug Crowd, for allowing me to present on this topic, the diary of an inexperienced bug hunter. So, to give a bit of background, about 3 months ago, I participated in a weekend bug bounty session. And I always wanted to participate in bug bounties, but always talked myself out of it because I was like, I don't have enough experience, I don't know what I'm doing. So the experience was fun. I didn't find any bugs personally. And after that, I decided to continue on with bug bounties, but focus on mobile devices because I felt that was an untapped area. And I'm sure most people on the call, or some people on the call, you've seen news reports of mobile devices being hacked into, malware, stealing data. So I was like, oh, this is like a really interesting area. And I didn't have any experience in mobile security, so I love to learn. And so I was like, this would be a good area. But even though I was excited, in the back of my mind, this was what I asked myself: what have I gotten myself into? So, disclaimer: images used in this presentation are not from any bug bounty programs. I just want to make that explicitly clear because I know some programs really don't want you to share their stuff. So the images I'm using are not from any bug programs in particular. And this is the agenda that I plan on talking about in this presentation. Why focusing on Android, a bit of background of Android security, components of an Android application, talking about Android Tamer, a mobile lab, how to get involved, resources, and suggested reading. So a little about me. As Sam said, master's degree in computer science, graduate certificate in information security and privacy. I also own a blog, Passion for Pen Testing. I created in 2012 the certifications. And also, if you want to find me on Twitter or Twitch, here is my handle, Bird of Beauty 007. Okay, so why focus on Android? Android is open source. Also, it's fragmented, meaning that the operating system on the mobile devices are manufactured by multiple companies. So, for an example, Samsung. And what that means is that these companies can add custom code on top of the base Android operating system. So meaning that Samsung and Nexus or another mobile device company might not have the same code for their phones. Popularity: Android devices are less stringent than the Apple's App Store. With the App Store, you send in your app. The App Store will review, determine if it's good or not, and then put it on the App Store. With Android devices, it's easier to sneak malicious apps onto Google Play. Google Play also has a process to determine good apps, but it's less stringent, and it's less stringent than the App Store, Apple's App Store. So a little bit about Android security. built on the Linux kernel, provides the following security features: a user-based permission model and process isolation. So I'm going to talk about application sandboxing because that's also important with Android security. So with application sandboxing, isolate apps from each other, assigns a unique user ID to each Android application, and runs its own process in that application. So the user ID is used to set up the kernel level application sandbox, and this extends to native code and operating system applications. Application signing. So this allows developers to identify the author of an application, provides a more streamlined process to update the application. Every application that runs on that Android platform must be signed. Applications that try to install on a device without being signed will be rejected either by Google Play or the package installer. And so application signing is the first step in placing an application in the sandbox, application sandbox, which I talked about in the previous slide. So now I'm going to talk about components of an Android application. So activities, services, content providers, and broadcast receivers. So an activity represents a single screen with a user interface and is similar to a window in a desktop application, and the application can contain one or more activities. A service is a general purpose entry point for keeping an app running in the background. It does not need a user interface, and usually a service performs long-running operations or performs remote processes such as internet downloads or data processing. Content providers supplies data from one application to others on request, and it's a centralized location. It provides centralized content in one place and allows different applications to access it. And broadcast receivers responds to system-wide broadcast announcements. These messages are called events or intents, and examples are if your screen has turned off, or everyone's favorite, when you're low on battery. Okay, so the next part of my presentation will be discussing the lab, the mobile lab Android Tamer. So the computer lab is occupied, and this really resonated with me because when I do my work, I have a cat. Matter of fact, she's right next to me rubbing the computer, and this is what she loves to do. And she's like, it's time for you to stop. Okay. So when I started my learning about mobile security, I found this really cool VM called Andrew Tamer. It's in its 4th version, and the handle on Twitter is Android Tamer. It's a one-stop shop for mobile security. Some of the features: development, reverse engineering, penetration testing. So if you look on the right is image of the virtual machine, and as you can see the different tabs. Dynamic analysis, forensics, manual analysis, penetration testing. So I've really found this to be a good virtual machine because when I first started, I was like, okay, I want to do this, but where are the tools? And then I didn't want to manually install them one by one. So when I found this VM, I was like, oh my God, this is a lifesaver. Now, I will do the caveat. I use Android Tamer. I don't know if there's other VMs similar to Android Tamer that might be a newer VM. As I said, this is the one that I'm showing is version 4, and I think it was last updated in 2015 or 2016. So it's a bit outdated. So I'm setting the caveat that there might be something more recent, but this is what I've used. So Android Studio. This is what I've used to review code and to create virtual devices to manipulate Android apps, which I will be discussing later. But Android Studio is a official IDE, integrated development environment for Android's operating system. It's built on JetBrains, IntelliJ, IDEA software, and it's available for Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. So one of the tools inside of Android Tamer, APK tool, I really love this tool. So it's used for reverse engineering third-party apps, can decode resources close to original form. You can rebuild the application after modification, which is really good. So if you want to modify an Android application, but you're not sure if you made the correct modifications, APK tool is a great resource. You can make the modifications, rebuild, and then test it out to see if it was what you were looking for. So after decompiling an APK, some of the files and folders that are produced are Smalley, Res, MetaInf, and Android Manifest, XML, and I will be discussing each in the following slides. So Smalley is an assembly language used by the Android Dalvik virtual machine, decompiled through a DEX file, and used for lower level inspection of Android app content. So Smalley is good if you want to look at the bare bones of an Android app and you want to see what the app does, and it provides a very useful way of doing that. So for instance, on the right hand and the screenshot on the right hand side of the slide is a quick snippet of where you see some Smalley code and you're looking, for instance, line 354 is determining a conditional. If it's equal to 0, then do condition 0. Also in 357, you'll see that there's a string that will be displayed to the screen. No emulator use permitted, go away. So again, Smalley is good if you want to know the bare bones of how an Android app works. Next is Res. So this folder contains additional files and static content. Some of the things that are in this folder are images. In the drawable folder, layout definitions, and the layout folder, user interface strings, and animation strings, which are in the values folder. Going next is the MetaInf folder. So this is used for certificates and signing of the application. So the cert.rsa, it contains the signed contents of the cert.sf file. along with the certificate chain of the public key used to sign the contents. The cert SF contains a list of all the files in the application along with SHA-1 hashes, and the manifest.mf contains information for the application, such as package version, build number, creator of the package, etc. Finally, the Android manifest file located at the root of the project presents essential information about the application to the Android system, information the system needs before it can run any code. The manifest declares the app's components such as package of application, describes the components of the application, activities, services, broadcasts, receivers, and content providers, declares which permissions the application must have in order to interact with the protected API, application programming interfaces, and other applications, and declares the minimum level of Android API that the application requires. So here's an example of the Android manifest. So we see the third line describes the package. Lines 4 and 5 describes version name and version code. Line 7 starts talking about the activity. Lines 9 through 12 discusses the intent. So for the activity, we have a main an action of main, and essentially to launch the activity. And then in line 16 describes the minimum SDK or minimum Android version. So in this case, it's 2, which means it's the first level, the first Android system, Android 1.1. Okay, so the next section, I will be talking about how mobile devices are pretty much little web browsers and how you can exploit this by finding vulnerabilities in apps. So how do you do this? One way is to use burp, and burp is a proxy to capture HTML traffic between web browser and application, intercepts, inspects, and modify traffic in both directions. There's a BAP store, which contains extensions to find, exploit security vulnerabilities. Some are bypass WAFs, web application firewalls, command injections, and SQL injections, where essentially mal-informed input, and you can gain information about databases. You can dump tables and get data. So an example here is what an interception will look like in burp. So in this example, it's using PortSwigger, which is the company that created burp. And so essentially we have intercepted an HTTP request, and you can see the host. You can see a multitude of things such as cookies, and what you can do with this is you can modify any of these values and then select forward. And what will happen is your new modified request will be sent to the server. Next is Excuse me. Next is repeater. And with repeater, what's really good about this function is that you can find a request and then you can repeat it as many times as you like to see what results you would get. This is really good if you want to try something out and you don't know what the results may be, or you have a hypothesis and you want to prove it out. Repeater is good because, as I said, you can take the request and you can modify it as many times as you want. And you on the right hand side is the response, and that's pretty much what would tell you how the page or will respond given the input you put in the request. Okay, so how does the information that I mentioned with burp tie into what we have with mobile security? So there is the AVD Manager, which is the Android virtual device. It simulates a physical device used to test and run your applications in different configurations. There's a command line option, and it's also built into Android Studio. This is very good if you do not have a device to play with. This is really neat because you can create as many devices as you want. So if you look on the right-hand side, you'll see a tablet, Android TV, Android Wear, a Pixel 3. And essentially what you can do is you can create as many devices as you want. Say for instance, if you're working and you're working on a bug bounty and you're like, hey, I want to test this device on a Pixel 3 because I believe that in the Pixel 3 it will be vulnerable, or I will get different results. You can create a virtual device and Android Studio, and then you can test out the application to see how it will work using the Pixel 3. Next is the SDK Manager, which separates, the SDK separates tools, platforms, and other components into packages. This is then downloaded through the SDK Manager. You can also use the SDK Manager to capture traffic from a device. And so this is an example here. On the left-hand side is burp, where you have a burp screenshot showing you the proxy. It's listening on the loop localhost at 8080. And then on the right-hand side is a screenshot from Android Studio inside the SDK. And if you notice, there's a manual proxy configuration with host name of 127.0.0.1, the local host, and the port number of 8080. You can also define if there's a special login or password for the proxy authentication. You can define that. That's not defined in the screenshot. So essentially what will happen is with this manual configuration, proxy configuration, when you're using a device, it will burp within intercept what the request, and then you can modify that request or let it pass through to see the results. So the conclusion of my talk is Android is popular to learn mobile security as the barrier to entry is low. Android Tamer is a good resource to learn mobile security as most tools are located in one location. Learning the tools are pretty straightforward, and if you are like me, if you thought about getting into bug bounties, but you weren't sure if you had the knowledge or the aptitude, definitely get involved. And I guess how to get involved, read write-ups if they're available, and then take the plunge into bug bounties. Bug crowd, HackerOne. You will never practice makes perfect, and you can read as many write-ups as you want, but you will never actually really learn or gain the experience without taking the plunge. So some of the resources that I found in mobile security, MobiSec, which is really good. I cannot think of the gentleman's name on Twitter, but he taught a mobile security course, and he has, I believe, 8 or 10 challenges ranging in difficulty. The mobile security testing guide, the hacking playground, the OWASP uncrackable mobile apps, and the Pentester Lab Android badge, and then a tutorial, Hacker 101 CTF. And below is the suggested reading if you want to learn more about Android security. And that was all I had.
All right. So, Jasmine, I wanted to let you know that people were a big fan of your cat.
Oh, thank you. I was trying to move her. I don't know if you guys heard her, but I was trying to move her. I
Yeah.
can also I'm going to stop sharing for a minute, and then
Yeah.
I can do a live demo of the Android Tamer VM because I
Okay.
have it pulled up, but let me stop sharing for a moment and then
Yeah.
I'll share.
Yeah, you're fine. You're fine. I've got it switched over on the live stream.
Okay.
Yeah, it was funny. You were talking, and I think you were gonna say like the name of a phone, and you were
Yeah.
like, and it's named by, and then the cat meowed right there, and it was just so funny. It was like your cat chimed in, and the chat lit up with a bunch of cat emojis.
Oh,
They were fans.
okay. Thank you. So this is, can you guys still see my screen?
We just see end of slideshow. Click to exit.
Oh, hold on.
No worries.
Let me stop because I think I shared just that. Okay. Oh, wrong one. Okay, can you guys see my screen?
Yeah, now they can see it.
Okay, so here is the actual Android Tamer virtual machine. And as I said, here are some of the features. Something that I want to play with, but I have not really done. Let's see if I can find it. Is the ADB, which is, I believe, the Android Debug Bridge. I believe that's what it's called. But that's the next section, um, my next journey with mobile security. Also, Drozer is something else that yeah, here it is. The Android Debug Bridge, that's another way to debug your Android or just your mobile applications. Um, I really haven't played with this, but that's the next step in my journey. What else did I want to?
See, a we had a
Uh,
message in chat where someone mentioned certificate bypass techniques. Have you learned personally about
I
certificate
really,
bypass?
I have not started that yet. As I said, I'm very new to this space,
Yeah,
about 3 months. So that is also something that's on my to-do list.
nice. So this
So
is how. So how long ago did you start? You started a few months ago. Is that what you're
yeah, I
saying?
started a few months ago.
Wow, you should be really
Yeah.
proud of yourself. You did a great job today.
Yeah, it's only really been about 3 months. It's some I sorry, I'm all over the place,
It's all
but
good.
um it's my cat. She says hello.
Someone just said every level up or sorry, stream should have a cat.
So, yes, please go. Thank you. So, for instance, this is the first level of the uncrackable challenge for OWASP. And again, I decompiled the APK, and you can see some of the stuff that I talked about, the res folder, which for the static content, Smalley. Let's see if I can open this in Android Studio. And again, I really love Android Tamer. Again, since I'm very new in this space, and I didn't want to spend like months on end finding software, installing software. So this VM has been a lifesaver for me. I liken it to Kali, but just for the mobile space, and I love it. Sorry, I should have had this ready instead of everyone just looking at um a project to build.
Yeah. We just had a funny comment. It says on the internet, no one knows if you are a cat.
Oh, no, it's not what I wanted. Where are you going?
Let's see. So someone just asked in chat, since we do have time left, we have
Mhm.
about 30 minutes, I think. So
Oh, okay.
it's okay. So someone was asking if we could do a live of testing on a program. We could, unfortunately, since we're live streaming, we
Yeah,
couldn't let people test on live targets just because we don't want to get in trouble.
yeah,
we
yeah. That's why I'm using the you know what? Let me.
Yeah, I appreciated that comment earlier, by the way.
Yeah,
We've
it
had
was. I
funny,
was. I was just like, I'd rather err on caution
yeah,
than hold on. So let
no, it was
me.
smart. Let's see here.
So I'm actually going to demo, I guess, how you would decompile an APK.
Okay, yeah, that sounds great. And which have you hacked on? So I guess have you taken this over to bug bounties yet? And what kind of programs have you hacked on?
I have I've downloaded a few APKs and I've looked at them. Um, I really I haven't actually found a bug yet, but I'm still actively
You're on the
looking.
hunt. Yeah, that's
Okay.
cool.
Um, come on, come on. Um,
On your next level up, the cat should have a byline as well.
what did I call it? Okay. So we have decompiled the uncrackable level 1. And if we go to my download location, you will see these are the folders. The Android manifest here for this APK. Excuse me, let me get some water very quickly.
No problem. While you're doing that, Jason Haddix left a good comment. He said a lot of the mobile app bugs that we receive these days have to do with hard-coded secrets.
Yes,
Yeah.
that someone else has told me that, and that's what I've been looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's either hard coded secrets or problems with the APIs or websites. I feel like the platforms themselves. There used to be bugs like not protecting the data very well or writing it to a world readable place on the
Hmm.
phone. And there used to be like a lot of intent bugs and stuff like that, at least back when I did this back in the day. But a lot of those have gone away because the platforms themselves, iOS and Android, have really mitigated them with
Oh,
OS. So like
oh,
most of the stuff we see
uh-oh.
now is like certs and API keys and passwords hard coded, and then the rest would be URLs that have basic web bugs on them as too. So using burp is
Hmm.
the core competency for a lot of this.
Okay, so here we have the Android manifest. Um, we can see the package here, SG Vantage Point Uncrackable 1, and it points to the main activity. We have an intent filter, the main, which launches the activity. I'm going to see if I can actually, okay, so it finally opened. Here we have some Smalley, and remember in my presentation, I was saying it's like the low level bare bones of an Android app. So for the uncrackable level 1, we here's some of the Smalley. Um, so we see here it there's a string, this is unacceptable, the app is now going to exit. So I'm still playing with this, so I haven't cracked it yet, but I feel like I'm very close. And so here's some of the Smalley for this app. Let's see. Um, so here, the meta inf. So we have the cert art. Okay, that's not gonna open. So we have the cert RSA, the cert CF, and the manifest. I'm trying to see if I can open any of the actual code. I think I did this before. Sorry, this is what happens when you do a live demo. um, okay, I was actually looking for some Java code, and I don't actually see this here. Yeah, I was actually trying to see if there was any. Um, I wanted to show Java code to see the code for like the activity, but I actually do not see it listed. So also another another tool is um, JDX, where you can provide, I believe, a jar, and then it can decompile your Android application, decompile, and then you can see the actual code. So let me see if I can actually do that very quickly. Also, something to keep in mind when you're working with bug bounties and you use JDX, the JDX GUI, most times the code will be obfuscated. And what that means is that um, the code will be hidden. So, for instance, uh, okay, so for instance, how I can see here the different methods like on create, view, verify, and the actual class names will, for most applications, that will be obfuscated, and meaning that instead of seeing main activity, you might see the letter B. And then for method, like how the methods are being explicitly written, you won't see that. It'll be like C or D or something unintelligible. And the reason for that is you don't, um, developers of the app, they don't want you to readily reverse engineer their application. So that's one level of them trying to deter you or making it much harder for you to reverse engineer their application. So here, um, for the uncrackable one, we see the main activity. So, and there has to be a main activity um, for an Android application. So I didn't mention, and let me mention it now, that this is built, upon, you use Java as the programming language. Um, so this is the code for the main activity for the Uncrackable One application. So this tool, JADX, I'm using the GUI version. There's also a command line version as well here. Essentially, you can use an APK, a jar, class, zip, and essentially what it will do is it will decompile the application, and then you can see the code. Well, if it's not obfuscated, you can see the code, and then you could kind of use that to learn more about the application, try, see if there's anything like Jason said that was misconfigured, or if you see like secrets or anything like that. This is a good tool to have. A good tool to have, a good tool to learn, even if there are no secrets, just to get a general idea of the application, because that's something when you're doing bug bounties, that's something that's very important because you want to know, have a general idea of what the application does, because then that could kind of guide you in what you're looking for, what you need to test more, and things like that. And let's see, that's Barbly. So here, the CERT SF, in this case, you'll see you'll see the files listed, and in this case, excuse me, it's using the SHA-256, and you can see the hashes here, and the manifest MF. You see some more hashes, and that was pretty much all I had. Sorry for not having the demo ready, but are there any questions?
Have you learned yet about dealing with obfuscations? We had a question about what to do if there's obfuscations.
So what I've I really haven't played with it, but I have read that I believe Android Studio has a software called ProGuard. I believe that's what it's called, and it's a tool that can help you unobfuscate the code. But even with that, you probably will not get a one-to-one match, meaning you will not, turn back, get everything, the whole functionality. But I have heard of ProGuard. I also read that some people look at the code and then they will kind of decipher, and then they will restart renaming methods. Like if a method is A, but you realize it's used for like getting data. So what I've read is, instead of naming it A, you might name it get data. And then it's like doing that like when you do that with different methods, changing the letters to actually methods, that's another way to kind of figure out what the application does. But those are the only two things that I've read, and I really haven't had a lot of experience with it.
No worries. Well, thank you so much, Jasmine. I had a great time. I really appreciate you sharing with us your journey here as as you say, the title is The Diary of an Inexperienced Bug Hunter. So,
and I just want to say, I just want to leave this as my parting words to the people on the call. Um, I actually attended the Level Up conference in January, I believe. I think that was Level Up 3.
Yeah.
And I always was like, oh, this is so cool. I really wish I can do this. And I just want to just leave people, if you can do this, right? Because I've only spent 3 months, and by no means am I an expert, but if you feel like you can do this, you can. And, just start, just find a passion, whether it's mobile security, web applications, cloud. But, if you're passionate, just take the leap and, learn more, and then try to apply it to bug bounties, because that's how you learn, and that's how you make the community better. I know that sounds really cliche, but I really do believe that.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
I think for some people who've never even touched a mobile app before, which we have quite a few,
Hmm.
um, just opening up and deobfuscating the code is the first challenge, right? And
Yes.
you definitely see a lot of that's like the level that you need to get to find
Yes.
right? Like a hard coded cert or a hard coded API key. Like
Right.
not that hard, but you just need to get past that hurdle, which is pretty
Yeah.
cool that you got there in in a month. So that's awesome, or a couple months.
Yeah.
Very cool. Thank you
So
so
thank you. So thank you guys so much for listening to my presentation. Again, sorry the live demo was kind of wonky, but I really do hope that you've learned something, and I hope that you too. I hear your talks as well. Other people who's participating, actually become speakers and tell us what you have learned. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jasmine. Everyone in the chat, please throw out a a round of applause. If you're on Twitter, give her a shout out. We've tweeted out her Twitter handle, and you can give Jasmine a shout out and use hashtag #ItTakesACrowd. But thank you so much, Jasmine.